A call to order the Wednesday, September 27th Planning Commission meeting. And may I have a roll call?
Chair Lowe,
Here?
Vice Chair Quilty,
Here.
Commissioner Andre,
Here.
Commissioner DeBolt,
Here.
Commissioner Gross,
Here.
Commissioner Zolfakanik,
Here.
and Commissioner Zelmer.
Here.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, oral communications. Seeing none, I will move on to the consent calendar. And we have the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting on August 23rd. Any discussion regarding those minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Mr. DeBolt. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
We have one abstain for Commissioner Solfakanik. We'll move on to the public hearings, and we'll start with the public hearing 6A, which is a continuance. And at this time, I'll open up the public hearing, if anybody would like to speak.
I need to recuse myself again?
Okay?
Isn't that?
Yeah.
I mean,
I'll make a motion to approve it, the continuance.
Okay. So we have a
Oh,
motion.
just going to go with it. Okay, cool. I thought you were going to ask me to.
I'm not going to bother with you tonight.
A few times.
No problem. Yeah, I've said it.
We will have a motion to approve the continuance of
Second.
item 6A, and we have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now,
And she's back. Come on back.
Did you get your exercise in?
Yeah.
Good. Get your steps in. Okay, we're going to move on to discussion item 7A, which is the noise standard exemption and definitions for maintenance and construction. At this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Montenegro for a staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner Lowe, and thank you, members of the commission. So as you may recall, this was a previous discussion item. We did not bring this at the last meeting. We needed a little bit more time to perform more research and gather a little bit more data. For the purpose of tonight's meeting, we have such information. And so as you can see in your packet, we have the basically the background. The Planning Commission is presented with proposed language intended to clarify and better define existing exemptions from the city's noise standards for noise related to construction, and it really should say noise sources related to construction property maintenance activities. So tonight's recommendation, with your approval, is to discuss some of the language that we were able to refine in regards to the noise standards exemptions relating to the noise sources associated with construction and property maintenance activities, and then ultimately come back at a later meeting to draft a resolution with those subtle changes. And in your packet, on page 13 of 25, we have the background from the past meeting that was held in July 26, which shows the current language and how it could be a little bit ambiguous and unclear as far as how those noise sources are considered during certain times for repair, remodeling, or grading of any real property, provided a permit has been obtained from the city, and further provided the activities do not take place between the hours of 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. on weekdays, on Saturdays, or any time on Sundays and federal holidays. And then the next line on E, noise sources associated with the maintenance of real property, provided the activities take place between the hours of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. on weekdays and on Saturdays, or between the hours of 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. on Sunday or a federal holiday. So tonight, what I'd like to present is, as requested by the commission, to try to identify or clearly refine what construction means versus repair as it relates to residential properties. So during our research of surrounding neighborhoods, it was fairly consistent with the way that the information was provided on their municipal code. Cities such as Seal Beach, Cypress, Stanton, and La Palma, among others, had very similar structure and language. Very common that the definition of repair construction was not actually provided in the municipal code. And so it does one of two things. It allows city staff, in this situation, code enforcement, to have subjectivity of what they observe versus what was reported. As I mentioned at previous meetings, a lot of the subjectivity to what code enforcement does is on the education first, and then enforcement if it continues, or if there is egregious activity or obvious activity that is breaking the noise ordinance during the times that they're not supposed to be performing the work. Of course, provided that we have certain situations at times where we feel like, okay, better definitions would allow a little bit more clarity. So tonight, what we could do is, under the exemptions, what we identified under 17, make sure I get this right. Yeah, so the exemptions, it's refined slightly to basically say noise sources associated with construction activities, provided the activities do not take place between the hours of 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. on weekdays and on Saturdays, or at any time on Sundays and federal holidays. And the reason why that's important is because the line from D&E in the previous meeting, there's one section that says do not, and then there's one that says, you can. So it's a little bit of a wishy-washy confusion there. So we're trying to maintain consistency here, where we're basically inputting the same similar structure on E, where it says noise sources associated with the maintenance of real property, provided the activities do not take place between the hours of 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. on weekdays and on Saturdays, or between the hours of 6 p.m. and 9 a.m. on Sundays or federal holidays. So a couple things there to note is, I mentioned, it's more consistent, and the term noise sources is really the acting word there, because it allows code enforcement to respond to situations that are basically breaking our code in terms of noise, whether it's the hours or whether it's a consistency. That allows them to have that subjectivity. So on line F, for the purpose of this section, the following definition shall apply. The term construction activity means the building or enlargement of any structure, demolition, excavation, modification, alteration, substantial repair, remodeling, or grading of any real property. So this better equips our city staff to provide or to execute the right motion, but also to have a little bit more specificity on what construction relates to. On the next one, the term maintenance of real property means the routine, recurring, and usual work for the preservation or protection of real property and improvements, including lawn mowing, tree trimming, pruning, painting, power washing, gutter cleaning, or similar undertakings that do not constitute construction activities. One last thing to mention before I bring it to the commission is that we also removed the word permit as requested by commission. And it does not necessarily mean that anyone can perform maintenance or forego what our permit requirements are in place to do. It just means that we're not necessarily confusing the two things here. So hopefully, with your agreement, this is a little bit more clear, it's a little bit more consistent. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much for that. At this time, we'll open it up to the commissioners to speak on what they would like to discuss.
I just had a question.
Sure.
Times
Yeah.
are not to be
Consistent?
well, they're not
Considered.
to be considered in this
Correct.
particular. It's
Correct.
just more of a language cleanup.
Correct, yeah, so at the last meeting that this was brought up, July 26th, commission agreed that we would just focus more on the language, the definitions, and then the actual term permit from the language itself, and then make sure that there was a little bit more consistency with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I needed your vote last
So-
time.
But regarding the time, just to note one of the time items.
I'm actually quite confused about why you guys decided to switch into a double negative scenario because you're doing exempt from time activities that do not take place between, and why the switch from the exemption that was before?
One was one way and one was the other way. So I think they're just trying to make it consistent on both of them. But I guess the question could be is, which one, why choose one versus the other?
So that was made just to be consistent. It could
Go the other way.
Either way. It was just, before we had one
I agree.
that said, the exemption applies provided the activities do not take place within a specified time frame, and then a subsection immediately below it that says the exemption applies provided the activities do take place during this time frame. So it's a little bit confusing. No real preference either way. It's just intended to be consistent between the two.
Here's my question regarding the time is that maintenance can't start until 8 a.m.
Yeah, I saw that.
But construction can start at 7
So
a.m.
if you're doing it yourself, you can't start
Well,
until 8, but if
yeah.
you're
Yeah,
by
and-
yourself.
I would think that it should be the same.
And
Yeah, I think it should be the same too. We're-
Yeah, yeah.
Only because some maintenance, as an example, painting is maintenance, but it's also, you have a contractor that comes and their hours are usually
Seven.
contractor hours, like 7 to 3:30, so.
Right. Yeah, it should be 7.
That was the only reason I brought it up.
And here's the problem with that is that you have lawn mowing services lining up at 7 a.m., eating their breakfast at 6:50. I see them every morning when I go to work, and they're getting ready to go. They start at 7. So this is actually saying that they can't start at 7.
Right.
I'm not saying that they should. I'm just saying is that
I think
it
it
seems
should
like
be
that's
the same.
happening all the time. I mean, I see it every day on my street, so I don't know.
So we can take that direction if it's the consensus of the group and bring it back. One point of clarification I would ask is, with respect to noise associated with maintenance, we are allowed to have 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. on Sunday and federal holidays. Are we okay with keeping
Yeah.
that time frame
I think that's,
during
Yeah.
those
I think
days?
that's okay.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd like to add, though, is we are pretty strict when it comes to any sort of street maintenance, repairs. Anytime we've had projects, we communicate to our contractors that they are not able to start work until after essentially 8 a.m. or later. So it'd be worth looking
Really?
into
So this
that
says 7.
No, that's for construction.
for construction. So for instance, whenever we have the repavement of our streets,
Yeah,
we specifically stress to our contractors that they cannot start any work until 8 a.m.
but this says
Interesting.
7.
But that can
No,
be
no.
okay, that's contractual.
I think he's talking about
Yeah.
maintenance. He's saying that they fall
No,
under
that's
maintenance.
Construction or maintenance?
It's construction, but what I'm
Construction.
saying, when they're
So-
performing
Oh.
work,
They're,
Yeah.
we're actually telling them what's not on here. I mean,
Why not? Yeah, it sounds like an extra thing, not, if you're saying that's construction,
it says
they can
7.
start at 7, you're telling them
It'd be
8.
based on a city contract. If
Yeah.
I wanted
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
a contract with my contractor or
Okay.
somebody doing my project, I could start at 7. He could still limit, so he
That's
could
what I'm
still
saying,
keep it
yeah.
at 7.
Correct.
Yeah.
Meaning that we don't really care about that. That's, you know what I mean? If you do that, that's fine.
Your contract, as long as it's
Yeah.
within a scope, you can't go and tell them, oh, you're actually going to start at 6, because then you would be in violation of the code.
Right.
But telling them to start later or have a smaller window is no problem. You're still compliant with the code. So,
Yeah.
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 And they're lining up well before 8 o'clock. I mean, they're doing stuff before 8 o'clock. They're just not starting.
Well, they can, it's all noise too. If they
I
do
know,
if
I
they do all this
understand.
stuff without making noise, wouldn't care.
Yeah.
Right.
I understand.
What about, so, as a general consensus, do we want it to have, say, take place between these hours as opposed to do not take place? It's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but
Yeah.
I think it's
Doesn't matter to
easier
me.
to read if it says they can only take place during these
Between-
hours as opposed to.
You're looking at it
these are the
backwards.
hours
I don't
you
like the
can't
double
do it.
negative.
Right.
Yeah.
The exempt do not, that doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. I go back to the other.
okay.
Yeah, like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to change the maintenance to 7 a.m. to match construction?
Yes.
I think we should.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me. It's almost, typically the construction is more
Well,
activity than maintenance.
if you do that,
Not always.
why wouldn't you switch construction to allowing on Sundays then, like our proposal was before?
I'm saying, I look at construction as being
I look different, yeah.
more,
Had that.
That's hybrid.
more disruptive than maintenance. There's always, I know it isn't always going to be that way, but
Well,
So
All right, just to review, I have 7 AM under the maintenance time, and then going from do not to,
The hours you
So we're gonna allow them to fire up their leaf blowers and everything at 7 AM?
Yeah, it's been that way for,
I think they've been doing that right now. I mean, in our
Well,
neighborhood,
Yeah.
they start at 7.
no, I see 7 I mean,
Yeah.
I hear 7 all throughout my
Yeah, but it's supposed to be
neighborhood.
8. I mean, so they start at 7, they're in violation, right?
Well,
They would. Right now, they have been, I guess, but no one's.
Yes, yeah.
it may be a nonsensical distinction, but they're only in violation if by starting
Somebody
at
complains.
7, they're exceeding the noise
Right, it's all
standard.
about
So I
noise.
don't know. It likely does with that equipment.
Or,
Right.
I'm not sure.
or if somebody complains.
yeah,
Right.
They're still in violation, whether they complain or not.
Violation.
they're in
No, I
violation.
realize
we're
that,
going by
but
the
code
letter of
enforcement's
the
not gonna go.
law, yeah, they're in
Right.
violation,
Doing it
but by
somebody
spirit
could
of
be
it, our code enforcement, they're not gonna be chasing
Why do,
leaf blowers down unless it's being reported.
right, none of it's, unless it's, complaint. Nobody's out hunting. Why do we want to change the hours for Saturday and Sunday? Why don't we all be consistent across the week? Because it's going to be hard for homeowners and people to know the difference. I mean, seems like, why not just be 8 to 8, or 7 to 8, whatever?
I typically don't see a lot of, as much, them coming early on Saturdays. If people are doing lawn work, I see it a little bit later. And I think people after working all week, I suspect the reason being is that people want to maybe sleep in a little bit on Saturday or not have the noise restriction, and that's why I think they have a Saturday and Sunday time difference.
That was one of the, that was one of the angles we were taking with regard to having a little bit more flexibility on Saturdays, Sundays, with regard to being a good neighbor and not having any sort of issues where we have people that, like you mentioned, want to sleep in or don't want to have all this racket. It's a little bit easier to control that way.
And also, to that point, I think with regards to not doing it on Sundays for construction, like you said, it tends to be a little more evasive a lot of times on construction projects. So like if you got somebody doing that, you're trying to have a barbecue at your house on
Yeah.
Sunday afternoon, and these guys are just going to town next door. I think that's the other reason for that, or at least it makes sense to me
It
that
was
way.
very consistent across all the cities, is that they did not allow any construction on Sundays.
It makes
Remember,
sense.
this is exemption, so if you're having a barbecue and you're playing loud music, technically as a noise violation, you can get in trouble for it.
You could,
Yeah,
So,
you could.
Yeah.
But if you're having a barbecue and just having a
I
conversation,
understand that
and
we're
some
just
dude's
not
running
setting up an exemption.
skill saws and sawzalls and everything else next door, it's not always pleasant. I've actually had that scenario happen where they were doing maintenance on Sunday afternoon right behind my house. And it's a bummer, but they were within their
I
ability
mean,
to
tree
do
trimming
so.
and chainsaws is maintenance,
Correct.
and that's allowed.
That's what it says here.
It's also the frequency or the duration of the time that it's gonna take to do that work versus construction related, so therefore it would allow a little bit more of a brevity of like activity. If it's maintenance or lawn care, it's gonna be much less in frequency or range than it would be on construction. Mind you that
Not necessarily, if I'm.
usually, well, I was gonna say, usually if you're doing just maintenance, it's usually performed by the actual property owner versus construction. It's typically that you're hiring somebody to do the work.
If I had a tree trimming person come out to my house and trim my trees, it takes them all day. And that would be allowable on a Sunday, but a guy with a skill saw can't build a shed for me. That to me is just, I don't know, to me, it's different. They both make the same amount of noise, arguably.
And you're always going to find things, little things like that, that don't make sense. You can't get 100%. And how many tree companies don't want to come out on Sunday? Because I don't
Most
see that.
come on Sunday, yeah.
They don't even come on Saturday. So, I mean,
I
you're
typically
always
don't
gonna
run
find
it.
a
Yeah,
little
there's gonna be something. I don't
I think this
see it
has
as a
helped
major,
a whole lot.
major problem.
Defining, and I like the fact that we've gone to the definitions between the construction activities and the maintenance. I think that helps define it better.
I agree, but.
And I think that the hours should be somewhat consistent, but I agree with the maintenance, that we should be allowed on Sundays and federal holidays with that limitation a little bit.
Yeah.
You
But
have
my
people that
point-
work a lot.
My point goes back to what you guys shot down last week and a homeowner exemption. Because what your guys' argument is typically a homeowner's the one doing it on a Sunday, trimming his trees. But I, as a homeowner, can't build a shed. That, to me, doesn't make any sense. They make the same amount of noise. So,
Is a homeowner building a shed a construction truly, or is that more maintenance for your own property?
that's 100%
That's
construction.
construction.
Okay.
But,
So-
but again, it gets down to noise.
And you also have to have a
But
permit.
you're making an
but you-
exemption for
but you-
one and not the
But
other.
you have to have a permit for that too,
But-
to build a shed.
Not
But
necessarily.
you can't, yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you do.
Not- If it's under 120 square feet, it doesn't require
Okay.
a permit. Yeah.
Well,
Interesting.
What? Shouldn't say that on.
yeah, well, no, I mean, yeah.
Everyone's gonna be building 100.
No, we're gonna find things here and there. We're not gonna get perfect. What we're trying to do is get something that has flexibility and guidelines and gives some type of direction.
Yeah.
So part of the reason why this took some time was because we were actually trying to find the one city that had everything refined. Not one had definitions for both. Most of them actually just had it for construction activities, not so much for the maintenance. So it took some time. I really want to stress, this is part of the equation, that the amount of times that code enforcement is actually like stopping people from being able to do some of this activity, it's not on the first step. It takes a little bit of repeated activity and action. So it's got to be pretty egregious.
What if the language was changed to where it was construction by a licensed contractor? Where
We originally had the permit, and that was
No, well, I'm just saying then that they couldn't work on Sundays or federal holidays, but if it was construction by,
Well, so you're going to
You're-
penalize contractors, and you're going to encourage non-contractors?
Hash this out.
What's that?
You could have, lots of people use non-licensed contractors to do things that are very loud that
then
don't
then
require.
most
that's what I'm
people use
saying, by a
unlicensed
licensed contractor.
But who's,
If you put
Well, that's
that
what-
language in there, then a licensed contractor cannot work on
Right.
on
So
those
you just
days.
I think that's a limit.
You're penalizing licensed contractors, and you're allowing someone that's not a licensed contractor to
No,
do the
it's
work.
penalizing, but those jobs are typically larger. So a guy that wants to build a shed in his backyard is not a licensed contractor. He just wants to build a shed in his backyard.
But I think again.
We thought about this a little bit, and it's ultimately not my decision to make clearly, but one concern with that type of approach is that adds an additional step for code enforcement, an additional task that they have to root through. Okay, here's noise, it's within these hours, it exceeds our code, but they may be subject to an exception. But now I have to approach people and find out if they have a contractor state's license and who's
Yeah,
doing the
or-
work.
or if I'm even operating under
So
my-
it's ju- we can write this, just do anything you want, but when
Well,
we're
that's-
contemplating this, we're thinking about practical application and what our people in the field will be able to kind of sort through and understand and work with. So-
Well, I don't think you were here last time we discussed this, but one of my things that I tried to bring up was, as long as homeowner is present with one additional person or two additional people, that, to me, I wanted to include in the exemption, but that unfortunately got shot down, so.
Well, is this something that we get? I mean, do we get complaints about this? I mean, how? I
Well, they
tend
did
to
this-
think if we left it, I mean, if we added that the Sunday, 9 to 6 for contractors, so that it does right, so that it does cover all the bases and it is consistent, is that really going to create much of a problem? Because most contractors are not going to work on a Sunday unless they're behind schedule, and sometimes they end up working on a Sunday. But that's
Most contractors don't think they can work on a Sunday most of the
Yeah.
time, you know what I mean?
yeah.
This was brought up, this was kind of a motion brought up by me about 4 months ago, before this all kind of started. We did a whole issue about how many, I think it was 20 total violations last year for noise ordinances. And of that, and I'm
11.
making up money, 11 were construction people, the other ones were homeowners. And so, I mean, it wasn't that much, but it happened.
Right.
But my whole thing was this, was to bring, when I brought it up, is really about the homeowner doing work on their house. And to me, based on what the proposal is, I can go out there with my leaf blower all day between the hours of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. and have my leaf blower and change the battery out and consistently have my leaf blower because it's exempt, because I'm doing cleanup, okay? but I can't go out there with the belt sander to go restain my deck and sand my deck. That to me makes no sense. And that's the problem I have with these exemptions that we're establishing here and how we're defining it.
Well, it's a valid point
Is-
because of the way that the language is being, the terms now for construction versus maintenance.
Exactly.
That now that's more of an issue than it was before. And I think, I do, I mean, I agree with that point because that's going to be extremely confusing if there's a code enforcement to a guy who's doing it and he's like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? That's going to be an issue. You know, what if then it just as a suggestion, goes 8 to 6, Saturday and Sunday for both groups?
No.
I think you're gonna lose that, yeah.
That's what got shot down last time too.
No, no.
Well, you're okay on
On Sundays I propose Sundays and federal holidays, you include the exemption for both groups between, and I said 9 to 5. I even narrowed it even more.
that
And
you
it
can
got shot
operate
down.
during that time?
Yeah.
That's what
And it got shot down.
But you can make noise in that time.
Yeah, right
You can
now,
operate all you want. The issue is noise. This is not a prohibiting somebody from working on their property. This is prohibiting them from making excess noise.
I understand
on a
that.
Saturday and Sunday.
Which is why I'm a little confused that it's 8 to 8 for maintenance. It seems
Well,
excessive to me. That's what I'm saying.
Well, make it 8 to 7.
I
mean,
feel like
I'm
it should
good with
be,
that.
you know, if it's a Saturday, 8 AM to, 5 or 6 PM seems logical. That's why I'm saying, to make it more consistent,
Well-
you've got maintenance from 8 to 6, and on Saturdays for construction, you have, see, it's backwards, so it's like,
Well, it's
so now it's
7 to 8.
7 to 8. I mean, I think that's excessive. And so we already agreed that we would change that for maintenance on Saturdays to 8 o'clock. Right? 8 AM?
7.
7 a.m.
7
No,
a.m.
on-
7 to
On
7 to 8.
Saturdays as well? I thought we talked.
Saturdays is
Saturdays?
included with
7 to 8.
We're
weekdays.
changing it to
Saturdays and weekdays
7
are the same.
On
It's just
changing-
Sundays and
same.
federal,
So there's-
just Sundays and
So
federal
there's
holidays are
Saturdays.
different.
Right, so 7 AM on Saturdays, and then on Sundays, you've got,
9 to
back
6.
to-
9
yeah,
to
9 to
6.
6.
9 to 6 on
But
Sunday.
construction
For
activities
maintenance.
is fully excluded.
Right, so
Right.
why don't we
Yeah.
do 9 to 6 on Sundays for
No.
construction?
No.
That's what I'm saying.
You're going to get in trouble.
No.
Yep.
How do you figure?
Nobody wants that.
I
But
do.
who's gonna
You're
do
gonna-
it, is my point.
Well,
My
that's-
point is, you can have a guy now, a homeowner, work on his property, doing the construction projects from 9 to 6, where now you cannot. And it's very, very rare that you get a contractor wanting to do work on a Sunday. It's just, you're not gonna see it.
You
It
will.
might not be a licensed contractor. There are plenty of handymen who work on Sundays and make lots
But
of.
there are also plenty of homeowners that do. So now you're
Yeah.
excluding homeowners. That's the
Right.
whole point.
That's what it's
This excludes homeowners from being able to work on any construction projects on their house. What if a guy wants to actually build a room on his house and he works another job and he wants to do it on Sunday? I mean, you've just eliminated him from being able to do that.
And that's exactly why this
And
was brought
so-
up. My direct
So the
neighbor.
quiet enjoyment of your neighbor's property.
Yeah, I think most people would not want to do
But
that.
that's why quiet enjoyment can be limited, just like it's limited for maintenance activities between 9 and 6 on Sundays.
It's still a
You
noise
can make
issue.
9 and 6 on, for construction.
Noise.
It's still a noise issue
By
anyway.
a homeowner.
Let him do it. If he exceeds the noise, then it's a problem. If he doesn't exceed the noise, then it's not a problem.
That's right. You don't, that's
you just let him-
exactly where we're at.
You
This
let
is a-
him, do it, you keep these the same so that everything's the same. So it's easier to manage, it's easier for code enforcement, they know the times are all the same, doesn't matter. And
These
if
are
they exceed the
exemptions.
noise
These are not-
ordinance, they exceed the noise ordinance, and that's the code violation, not that they're not able to work on a project at their house.
That's where we're at.
That's where I'm at with it.
And that's where we all got. And these are exemptions. These are not
Right.
your,
But to me, like I said, under what we're proposing, my neighbor can be trimming his trees and blowing his yard, and I can't sand my deck. Arguably, mine was gonna be less loud.
I'm on your side, I'm saying that we should change it to have it all be the same and have working on Sundays from 9 to 6, like
I think
maintenance.
construction activity should be 9 to 6.
That's, I'm in agreement with you.
Yeah.
Well, I think,
Isn't the
I think
standing-
sand- I think
standing of a deck
sanding, I think
maintenance?
sanding your deck is maintenance.
Maintenance.
Standing would be
Is
maintenance.
maintenance.
so I
Could
don't
be, but what if you gotta,
Standing and sta- no, what if I'm building my deck?
or what if you gotta
Then you do it
replace?
on, you do it on Saturday and you do it
Or you
6
gotta
days, 6 days a
replace-
week instead of 7 days.
Yeah,
a
but
week.
look,
If I
there's
work
people.
5 days a week and I can only, that's
Oh,
why this whole thing got brought up.
That's,
You know, because now I got an ugly house next to me that the project, which was supposed to take 3 months, is now taking 9 months because the person's limited to work. You know, and it's even worse.
I think it's
For the-
not consistent the way it
it's-
sits right
It's just the inconsistency is what
Well,
drives
what-
me crazy.
well,
Okay,
the
so
question,
let
the
me ask-
question
We
becomes,
could
should
just
there
get-
be noise on Sundays? So should Sunday, for, let's just say for the neighbors, should Sunday, for lack of a bet, it's a day of rest for 90, for whatever percentage. The one day of the week, maybe for the people that work 6 days a week in their other job, whatever, to come home and have at least one day where they can have peace and quiet, with the exception of if somebody's gonna get out and they're gonna mow their yard, they're gonna do whatever, rather than to have, you know, somebody running a construction project, pounding nails, running the saws, and disturbing that one day. And if that one person, you know, he's trying to, you know, he works 6 days a week and he wants to build his house by himself and he has to work on he can only work on Saturday and Sunday. Well, what can I say? Take a day off during the week and or hire somebody during the week to come in and do what you can't do.
And we have to look at the
You gotta
masses.
think,
We
you
can't,
gotta think globally to
Yeah.
the, you know,
you
Yeah, so
can't think
arguably,
about,
then I would propose, make it consistent. The noise for maintenance should be off on Saturdays, on Sundays and federal holidays then.
but maintenance is, basically, you're gonna do this on noise, so if they're too loud, they're gonna get the code enforcement out there. Maintenance allows you to do the sanding on your deck that you're interested in, or the little things here and there, for these people who do work more days. But they can go to Saturday, they can go to Sunday. I would be surprised if you're gonna have a lot of construction on
Construction-
Sunday. But the other end of it is, I don't want to open that door so that everybody, because we are worried about one house. We need to worry about globally, everybody, and to say, I don't want my neighbors next door on Sunday of all days. I don't care what they do on Saturdays. But on Sunday, I'd like it to have some quiet, because I'm typically doing my work that I can't get caught up at work.
But the way this is
But the
written.
way this is written,
You
it's-
get no relief on Sunday.
On Sunday.
No, you don't.
No, you get maintenance, and maintenance
Leaf
is
blowers
under.
and mowers are
those don't
sometimes
bother me.
way loud, they bother the heck out of me.
Oh, they
So you'd
just
like
don't.
to-
I'm just-
You'd like to eliminate on Sundays and federal holidays?
I'm saying to her point, that's not true, because if you allow this the way it is.
But if someone's building a house right next door to me, trust
I
me,
think
that's
it's-
a lot more
And
noise.
sanding your deck is not,
It's
is not,
not
under
an
these
hour.
terms, sanding your deck would not, in my opinion, would not be considered maintenance of the real property. It would go under
Oh, I think it would
modification
absolutely
and
be maintenance.
alteration or substantial repair.
oh, we,
That is a substantial repair to your deck. If you are redoing a deck or staining a deck.
we're getting.
And there again, that's
I
when you
don't
get
think
into
that's
semantics,
the
because it's
same.
not,
Exactly.
I'd like
because it's
to-
not, because it's
I'd like
not.
to
Okay, we'll take a quick break here, so
Take here and
Mr. Montenegro.
Thank you. I'd like to really just try to come down to a decision here because as you can see, we're having this discussion about subjectivity, about how it applies maybe to one or
Right.
two. You open that Pandora's box to the community, it's gonna get a lot messier, where if we follow the way that it's written or proposed here, it allows code enforcement to be able to identify, okay, this is the problem, this was the noise source as reported, we're tracking it, this is how we're gonna handle it. Mind you that, again, unless it's something that someone mentioned, building a house, that's purely permit, related, you have to have a permit. Mind you, the contractor has to have a business license, there has to be credentials on file, plans approved, there's a lot more steps involved. So you open that Pandora's box, it's not just gonna affect code enforcement, it's not just gonna affect the neighbor, it's gonna affect our building official, it's gonna affect our planner, it's gonna affect our office, because now this is gonna grow much larger in scale. So ultimately, it's the commission to decide, but I would strongly encourage you to consider that broader scope of what we would be doing if we open it up to construction related. Again, I'm really gonna stress this because this was not just me, hardly me performing the research. Our code enforcement team, our planner, even our building official had input on this. It's very common amongst other cities. We're already stretching it.
Yeah.
have it this way.
I like
I
the
would
way it's
agree.
written.
I also like the way it's written.
I'm okay. I, on the maintenance, on E, I would like to see that time coincide with the, the 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., so that the construction and maintenance are at the same time. 7 a.m. to 8 a.m.
I have that written down.
8 p.m.
And beyond that, I'm fine with it.
What about the hours on Sunday and federal holidays? Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
9 to 6?
No,
Yes. Okay.
no.
Okay.
No, and I'm not okay with the term maintenance of real property, because rereading this again, maintenance of real property, preservation or protection of real property and improvements. Well, is improvements now construction? It's, and then specifically allowing tree trimming, very loud activity. I think you are essentially opening a Pandora's box with that. There's no time limitation on that through this exemption. If you're gonna be trimming your trees, you should be, we're talking about noise, then they should be limited to no more than an hour of work exceeding the noise ordinance. If this is the case, I mean, somebody can really take advantage and say, I'll come, I'll open up a tree trimming business and say, hey, I'll come to work on Sundays for half price. Really piss off people. It's, you were specifically allowing activities here that are very loud.
Well, potentially, I guess.
But there is a noise ordinance, and that will be enforced with it.
No, it won't, because it's an exemption.
Yeah. I think the gist behind it is that this maintenance isn't going to be every Sunday kind of a thing. I know it can be, but I think that's the intent behind it is the maintenance isn't
Neither
going
is
to be
construction.
every
Well,
Sunday.
The same argument
I
is.
think it's going to be,
I think
it'll be a
there-
longer time period.
I think there is a distinction between what the general sensitivities, just in general right now, community-wide, for those that live in single-family neighborhoods, okay, that people do mow their yard on Sunday, they do some trimming on Sunday, etc. However, getting into construction, building, that noise associated with that is a different type of noise associated with the normal maintenance of property. Okay, granted, yeah, the decibel levels might be the same, but it's a matter of tolerance, because it's a different noise, okay, and that would be my distinction right there. And whether it's for the preservation or protection of real property and improvements, I think that means the improvements that are on the property. It doesn't mean constructing new improvements. I don't know if that was alluded to. I mean, real property includes the land and everything attached to it. So, I mean, if you wanted to be more specific in there, you could, in protection of the, I think real property improvements and improvements thereon, I mean. But beyond that, I think it's adequate. It's good.
I think we've come this problem before when we try to get too specific. We just we open up a thing that we can't control. You know what I mean?
We'll have
Because
15 pages.
yeah, it becomes overwhelming, and there's always going to be subjectivity. I agree, and there's going to be situations where maybe there's going to be things that don't conform or don't make sense. I agree with you, but I don't think we can write something long enough that would make sense for every potential activity. Unfortunately, I agree with what you're saying, but I think a lot of it here is the intent too, and I think the city employees are going to go with kind of the intent process too, or what's happening here. Is this a one-time thing? Is this a multiple-time thing, or what kind of offender is happening here? And and the homeowner, we can always disagree, and we can always fight that. We can always fight the city. I don't know. I mean, I got you. I don't see how we can make it better.
So are we?
So with those two changes then,
Yeah,
Yeah.
changing it to not a negative and changing
the time.
the time,
The times are the same.
Yeah.
let's move on.
So do we need to make a motion on that, or can we just move on to another discussion item?
You can make a motion if you'd like, otherwise I think we've received enough input through the discussion that we know what changes to bring back
Okay.
at the public hearing to actually move the item now.
All right.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move on to 7B, which is the electric vehicle charging stations discussion.
This will be
And
a quick one.
I will turn that over to staff. Would staff like to give us a report on that?
Okay, Chair Lowe and members of the Planning Commission. This discussion concerning possible Los Alamitos Municipal Code standard changes for electric vehicle charging stations was brought up by Commissioner Gross during a meeting or so ago. And the other commissioners agreed that this was an item of interest to bring up. And preliminary research was conducted by the city attorney's office. And they found that local agencies have limited authority to regulate electric vehicle charging stations. Local jurisdictions must approve applications to install electric vehicle charging stations through a non-discretionary permit, which means that you guys can't deal with it, other than you could change the law about it. But a local jurisdiction may only require application for a use permit if it makes a finding based on substantial evidence, which means public health or safety issues, which is not aesthetics. But if those aesthetics go into the health or safety issue, I imagine we could make some kind of thing about that, some kind of change. Any policy must adhere to the legislators' stated intent to limit obstacles for EV charging stations and to prevent local agencies from adopting ordinance that create unreasonable barriers or unreasonably restrict their installation. You can see in there what codes other cities do. They basically just follow what the state has asked them to do. And they all have to do with health and safety issues. It was, let's see. Okay, so staff recommends that planning commissioners discuss this, and if you feel like there's something that's outside of health or safety that might fit under health and safety, let us know. Yeah, I'm getting lost in what I'm saying here, so.
I saw the chart.
So I do
Yeah.
have a question. So I'm not opposed, again, so it's not a matter of my being opposed, but I am concerned. Health and safety is my number one. Has the fire department weighed in on their thoughts about location, do we know? Or I keep trying to think of the things that would concern me. Access for them to get to a business would be something I'd like to know from the fire department, what their thoughts are. Location, I want to make sure that they have access without something being in their way that makes delay for them. They are number one to me, fire and emergency. So that would be one of my things. And then I got to thinking about this one today. Gasoline taxes, as we know, regardless of what the cost is right now, there's a lot of taxes that go into it, and it trickles down on we're going to get something out of it. What are they doing with the electronic stations? Are they paying a tax, and do we get anything from it? And is there any way for us to work with legislators to get tax money out of it?
Yeah, I can have a very general response to that. In fact, just in a staff meeting this week where one of our executive directors attended the League of Cities annual conference, and there's definitely discussion and conversation about what will happen once we inevitably start losing gasoline tax funds, and there is a push to try to find a way to sort of backfill that loss of revenue with addressing the EV car thing with either, some sort of tax that's put on top of utilities to try to account for that additional draw. So I don't know where that will head, but I know that people are definitely looking at that. and are certainly concerned because that's a significant amount of local revenues derived from the gas tax.
And then the other thing I wondered about was what Commissioner DeBolt had addressed too. Do we need to address this in our, when new housing projects come and buildings come to us? Are we going to need to address how we do that?
It would not necessarily be something the planning commission would have to look at, but as they go through plan check with the building department, there are now code requirements for a certain number of either EV-capable parking spaces to be provided or actual charging facilities, depending on the type of development that's being processed.
Single family, we would just do the 240 or?
I talked to the building inspector today, and he said that we follow the green building code, and the green building code says that for residential, we have to make it possible for it to be hooked up in the future, that we have to have the infrastructure for it to be connected to. But for commercial, it does have to be provided based on that table that's in your report.
And if anyone's interested, just for fun, I actually made printouts of the green building code, if you want to take a look at that, so you can see how they've sort of lay it out as between, multifamily uses up to 20 units versus above. There's no retroactivity as of yet, so it really is prospective with any new development coming into play, what they're required to do.
Okay.
And just to kind of piggyback off of Tom, the law, as I understand it, for our building official will change every 3 years, so it's updating pretty often. And my understanding is that if someone is trying to renovate their garage or they're making any sort of modification to a main panel, there's also adjustments for that as well that they have to meet through the code. So it's definitely evolving, as Michael put it, but there's limitations, as you know.
And don't do it on Sunday.
Don't do it on Sunday.
Yeah.
So I would like to know feedback out of the fire department for health and safety, big time. We may not be able to control certain things, but I'd like to try to have something about aesthetics down the road. I'm not opposed to them, I just don't want them to become everywhere. Have we talked with the local gas stations? And I think Chevron has one, am I right or no?
No, I specifically talked to him about this issue because I'm experiencing the same thing in my line of work. And he said that the majority of gas stations are not going to be putting in electric charging stations. A, there's no room. They can't have these people like sitting in their small areas for long periods of time. There's no money in it. So they are looking at other alternatives, things like hydrogen. Also, there is a new fuel that they just did some testing on. It's 40% cleaner than regular unleaded, just by the way, whatever that is that they've done to it. They're getting a 40% reduction in emissions just from this fuel. So I think fuel stations are obviously going to be looking at coming up with ways to provide cleaner fuel, and hydrogen electric is not going to be their first choice by any stretch of the imagination. There's just no footprint for it. Some stations are really large. I mean, if you get out in the desert and you got those truck stations, I'm sure they've got, room for charging stations and things like that, and they'll do that, and they'll charge people for it and what have you. I believe, when Teslas first came out, there was no charge for these stations. I think they're grandfathered in, but all the new vehicles.
It's not cheap.
No, all the new vehicles are now having to pay to charge at those stations. You see the ones at like Ralph's that have the billboards. So that's a private company that basically charges. They might not charge you for charging while you're in the grocery store, but they put the billboard on there so that they get revenue from the advertising.
Right.
So there's different ways that they're trying to capitalize on it, but I don't see gas stations getting really behind it at this point.
It's interesting that we have a brand-new gas station adjacent to our city at Ball and Bloomfield. The Ralph's, it's a brand-new.
Oh, yeah, Ralph's gas
Brand-new
station. I
gas
saw
station.
that.
It's kind of interesting to have a brand-new gas station these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
Surprised to me.
Not going anywhere.
No, it's still going to take a while. And, it's funny, like I said, in my line of business, you've got a big debate right now on what to do about electric generators, which is extremely difficult. It's just a bank of batteries, and they don't last very long. So ultimately, you have to have a generator out there with the battery pack to charge the batteries. So it's a huge mess right now, and I don't know, it'll be interesting to see moving forward. The Fed in the States obviously pushing really hard on electric vehicles, but it's going to be interesting to see how this migrates forward, and if it stays electric, or does it go to a different mode that's maybe better for everything. We'll have to wait and see.
So I think we'll bring back your questions about the fire department.
I'd appreciate it.
I feel like that falls under building code where, you're putting parking, I mean, it has to go in a parking space, right?
Yeah.
I don't see how they could,
I've never seen one that's not,
They
that's
couldn't-
in the way of anything. And
they
I've
could,
charged
I don't
a lot
see
of
how,
Tesla ones.
I don't see how they
For
could
the
actually get
museum.
away with that.
The museum, it makes it very difficult for them to get into the museum, but it didn't impact Chase.
But the
Chase,
fire-
no,
I
the
mean,
fire, if they have an emergency in there, yeah, it does kind of impact them a little. It makes it a little awkward, but
Well, I think that's then when we have the
But-
ability to say something, because it's,
If it's a life and
But yeah,
Then we
that
can
would
actually,
be,
we
yes.
would have the ability
But I
to
would
say you
like
can't do
to
that.
make sure that we have this done so that they just don't throw them up without this being addressed. And the fire department would be
Yeah.
the one I think they should have gone to first, the double check.
Yeah, that's easy enough to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like I said, I'm not opposed to
Okay.
it. People want electric cars, go for electric cars.
Yep.
But at the other end, I'd like us to make sure that, and hopefully we get tax money down the road, which it will
Electric bus.
happen. So, but I would appreciate that part. And I do appreciate all the work you put into it, because I think there's so many things that are coming out in this gray area to a lot of us. It's nice to know. And I didn't think about what Commissioner DeBolt brought up last time until he mentioned the buildings for the houses and that.
Okay, we move on to item C, which is the Community Development Block Grant fiscal year 2024-25. And would staff like to discuss that?
Sure would. Chair Lowe. The CDBG people would like us to open this to the public every year. This is once again the open evening. Seeing that no one's here in the audience, we just have provided a group of streets in the report that we would like to identify they're within the zones that we can show our low income in the city, and we could use CDBG money for. But we'd also like to ask you as well. So back to you on that.
Anybody have any discussion on that?
So is this chart that you have on the second page after this, is that, you have a lot of things medium and high priority, only one low. Is there a particular order or preference that you guys are?
We prefer the high, and they usually ask us only to apply for high items. Those are really the ones that are the only ones that are selected by the county.
Okay.
So out of curiosity, on street improvements, is Catella in there? Because it's horrible.
Catella's not, because it's areas that are kind of between two different zones and stuff like that are not, and ones that are commercial on both sides are not. It has to be really residential on one side or the other that is low income. And it takes a little bit of, like Farquhar, when we do that, one side of the street is higher income and the other side of the street's lower income. But they have bent for that and allowed us to do that. But Catella's commercial on both sides, so it wouldn't work.
It's getting torn to pieces.
Yeah.
So,
But we are trying to do a grant for that right now, so.
Is Maple the street that Madeira's is on?
Maple.
yes.
Yes.
Oh, that street's terrible. I
No, that's Reagan.
turned there to avoid
Reagan.
Catella.
I was gonna say, that's not Maple.
Terrible. Oh,
It's
Reagan?
Yeah.
Reagan's terrible. By the fire station? huge potholes.
Yeah, that's because those fire
Whenever-
trucks go out and they, no, I'm
Howard.
kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went with, our city engineer goes out and identifies these streets. Every year he goes and drives and sees how alligatored they are, or whether they have potholes
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And these were the ones he suggested.
Yeah. No, that's-
So I assumed they were the worst in
Yeah.
his opinion, so, yeah.
Because you have street improvements for high, so that would hopefully be one of them.
Right, but these are the ones they're recommending at the
Oh,
end.
Yeah,
any street that's within a low-income area that needs to be fixed is a high,
yeah.
Yeah.
so,
Would it encompass all three of these that you're mentioning, or just one of these?
all three of these.
All three.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are smaller areas, so they would fit under the 350.
I don't know if this would fall under the grant, maybe it would, because you're talking about some of the streets in the apartment area. So over in the apartment area, everybody talks about the parking problem. Okay, obviously, we have a lot of tenants there, and I walk that area just about every morning. And I really think that we could create parking spaces. I don't know how many. It wouldn't be too hard to figure out. But by striping, just whatever a standard size for a parking space is, was 19 feet or something like that, 18 feet?
Well, yeah, when it's
And when it's parallel.
like parallel like that, it's longer, actually, than 19 feet. It's
Whatever it
20
is,
something.
because if you go down there, you're gonna see gaps, where some car pulled in, and he didn't pull up close enough to the next one, and then, and I've got to think that you could probably pick up 3 or 4 spaces in just about every block on each side of the street, if they were striped, so that people would have a
But
space
if
to.
it's striped, I think it would be longer, like,
Well, it doesn't, that's
I
the,
guess the way to
that's,
do it is that you would figure out how many fit, with the standard thing, how many would fit there, and you just go out randomly and count it.
go out and count.
How many are there?
So,
You know what I
just-
mean?
You might
How many-
already be, but I'm just wondering if that would be something that we could look into, because, and then also, where we red curb. If you have a 4-way stop, you don't need to red curb
Corner.
the corners, okay? Everybody's gonna come to a stop, you're gonna see the car coming. I mean, so you can have cars come up that way. And some of the alleys, yeah, you probably need to have a little bit of a space, maybe, but, red curb. But if we're judicious with the red curb, even like over by the park, they're getting ready to redo, over on Maple and Farquhar. There's apartments there, and people were able to park all the way up, and then for whatever reason, the city red curbed all the way back to the apartment building. You just took away 6 spaces or 4 spaces. It makes no sense. And
I'll let you.
so,
Well, I mean, I also know, I own an apartment over there, and I know that my tenant parks in her garage, but I also know 2 of the other tenants have their garages full and park on the street. And so, that's also an issue, because now they're giving up, the people who don't have garages can't park on the street. So you start doing that. I mean, have we ever considered permitting issues or anything else with how many?
You must have read my staff notes here, so.
Because permitting could possibly curb some of the people who have especially multiple cars. I know my neighbor has 5 cars, 2 drivers.
Yeah.
He parks 3 on the street and only moves it every other Friday when there's a street sweeper.
Yeah.
Takes up 3 extra spots.
So we're actually preparing a survey that will encompass street sweeping and parking permit. And within the survey are specific questions to some that you've already mentioned. Number of vehicles per household, parking limitations on specific days, specific times. And so one of the updates I was going to provide is that you can expect the survey to be out in the coming month through early parts of January. similar to what we just did recently with our short-term rental survey, and trying to get as much input from the community as possible, specifically in areas where they're highly concentrated and highly impacted. That is the first step in that direction. So absolutely valid points where people may not always occupy their garage for cars, they use it for storage, or they have situations where you got multiple people living there, or maybe not, and you have multiple cars. So there's a lot of factors in play, but we're hoping that the survey will reveal a little bit more clarity as to what the situation looks like. And this is going to be specific to each neighborhood, so it's not just a blanket survey. We're actually identifying each neighborhood specific to street sweeping schedule and whether or not how they their parking arrangement, whether they use both sides of the street versus one. So we're definitely on that path.
Along that line, regarding street sweeping, I really think that like the residential areas, the apartment areas should have weekly street sweeping. It can be, Tuesdays on one side of the street and Wednesdays on the other side, but we need to get weekly, because if you do it first, how we're doing it now, first and third, or second and fifth, or whatever it is, depending on the number of weeks in the month or when the holidays fall, you can go 3 weeks, 3 or 4, without it being swept, and the crud is piled up, the dirt, stuff like that. I mean, to me, those areas need to be kept up, just like, our residential areas. I mean, this is something the city can do to help, with the overall look. But I think striping, if it's possible, we want to maximize the use of the distance that you have for people to park. Okay, regardless of who's parking there, and then I think also, if we don't do it already, on new construction, any remodels, it should be mandatory garage door openers, automatic openers. Okay, and for apartments, and then you encourage the parking into the.
I think we put that in the code, right?
Did we do that already?
I thought we
Talked
did.
about it.
Yeah, I think we put that in the code, yeah.
Good,
I
okay.
think sorry to interject here. I think we need to kind of get a little bit back to the CDBG, because I don't know, is
Good try.
permit parking was a little bit of a preview into the announcements from the
So,
I would
department
say
here, but otherwise.
CDBG, the other area that I would be mostly concerned with, and it is a high area, is it has homeless facilities here. But I would argue also homeless outreach. I've noticed a significant increase in homeless activity in our city over the last 5 years. Maybe it's because I'm here more often, because I have an office here now, and they literally live in my office building on the weekends and at night. But I have just noticed a lot more activity here over the last several years. And getting a grant for that should be, I do think, a high priority. Whether it is creating facilities, outreach, see if we can, help them in some way.
Move down the road.
But it is definitely a big deal for me.
So just to kind of let you know, we are mandatory that we have to have a percentage of homeless beds available, but we are not required to make them. They have the right to deny access. So they have the ability, so we have that in our facility right now. It's just that they turn it down because they prefer what they've got right now for what they're doing for their activities. That's where the problem comes in. I'm going to go along with what the staff has recommended. I agree that area does need to get fixed.
Yeah.
There's several of them over there that need to be fixed, but this is a good start.
I agree as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Okey-doke. Move on to item 8, staff reports. Any staff reports?
Yes, so I mentioned the street sweeping parking permit survey. It's going to be launching next month, so you can anticipate that. Like I mentioned, similar to the short-term rental survey, there will be a QR code that directly lands you to our city website. It's not intended to be too long. Brief survey that should mostly cover all of the bases under street sweeping and parking permit concerns. As you received from our department secretary, you have your polos. If you can please wear that at our next meeting next month. We intend to have photos taken of all of our commissioners, and so excited for that. If you need a different size, please reach out to Gabby, and she'd be happy to make arrangements for a different size if that's necessary. Just a recap of our event this past, not past week, but a couple weeks ago, our Celebrate Los Al event. From all indication, it was very well received. That was our first event involving Pine Streets, which was basically calling out all of our Los Alamitos restaurants to participate in the event, provided a grant to cover costs for supplies, materials, and food, and personnel, I should say. And so we're going through the process of getting all the evaluation from restaurants, from internally, and we are anticipating to do this again next year. We'll make sure that we have proper notice well in advance of any sort of potential impacts to parking. But that's the type of feedback that's super helpful, is where we could have done better. You know, everything looks great when you're there, when everyone's having a good time, but behind the scenes, we know what we could have done. But if there's anything that you observed, if you happen to attend, please feel free to let us know. Sunset Saturday is coming up on October 14th. As you know, that's our second Saturday of every month, where we have our night market out on Pine Street, and we have various activities, vendors, a lot going on. And this month, of course, will be fitting to have a Halloween theme. So if you have time in your hands and you'd like to bring your family out, it should be a lot of fun. And then just a few more updates with regard to the youth center. The youth center itself has vacated the building right next to the community center. So internally, staff is evaluating what we could use it, you know, the purpose of what we could use it for. But the youth center organization itself has now officially moved out, and they're really getting ready for their new location off of Los Alamos Boulevard. So that's gone pretty smoothly. And lastly, the museum, it's going to be closed through the month of December. Entirely December, so they're anticipating to open up on January. Everything in terms of the renovation is complete. Painting, the floor, everything's been moved back in, but of course they're relying on volunteers and a lot of bodies to kind of get it back to what it was, and maybe even make some adjustments along the way. So in speaking with Ms. Poe, she's anticipating January they'll reopen, so just noteworthy. That's all I have under staff notes.
Okay.
Oh, Tom.
This weekend is Autumn Fest
thank
coming up too, so it's one of the biggest events in the city if you haven't seen it before. And it's for 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I think that was it. I had one more, but I can't remember what it is right now. Okay. Yep.
Okay. We'll go to commissioner reports.
The event on Pine Street was really good. From the Serve Los Al in the morning, it was well received by everybody. We got a lot of help for Precious Life Shelter. The street event that we were in that night, I heard a lot of positive feedback from people just as they were coming by our booth because we were so close to the food. Everybody raved about the way the food was handled and done, and they couldn't believe that they were just giving $1 and getting these nice little sliders and whatnot. I saw somebody over there eating a lot.
I saw you too, and I didn't say hi, but I saw you. You were working hard, so I didn't say hi.
I saw just tons of positive. I saw that everybody was pleased with the carnival area you guys had. I didn't hear a negative at all from all the people that came by our booth and from those that I walked around and kind of listened to and talked with a few people. And I was pleased. I got my neighbor. He came out. He's fairly new in the area. He's a teacher over here at Oak. And he came over and was so pleased to see what was going on. I think we'll get him and his family out more. And then we have the event coming up, I think it's October 21st, but it's Saturday, the third week, trunk or treat, and I'll be there in there. We'll have fun.
Yeah.
I'll be with my fun little vintage car all decked out. But yeah, it was really a lot of fun.
Thank you for mentioning that. I'll pass on the kudos for the carnival and other aspects of Parks and Rec, because they ultimately ran that aspect of the event. And thank you for reminding Trunk or Treat October 21st at Collinwood Park.
Yeah.
That'll be a lot of fun.
One other thing is I forgot to say, remember that in November, the planning commission meeting is on on Thanksgiving again. So we will decide next month whether or not to have the November meeting or move it, so.
Commissioner Solvacanic.
Yes. Yeah, we had a good discussion tonight. It was pretty lively and productive. And, but it's not the way it's supposed to go. We have a chair here. Luckily, there's nobody in the audience, but if we have a well-populated audience, we can't just be talking over each other and interrupting people. Everything should go through the chair. We used to get a binder and had Robert's rules in it. They're online. So people can read them, access them. But I think we have to have more decorum. I think we just have to, everything needs to go through the chair. People need to wait to their turn to be recognized, then they speak. When they're done, it goes through.
Yep.
That's the way it's supposed to be.
That's on me, so I apologize for
No,
that.
it's not on you. It's
Yeah.
just an observation.
Yep, no, you're
Do a
right.
great job.
I think I let it go a little more loosely, or I think because we were just here or something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that. So.
I get it. But if we have a lot of people, we can't be
Yep.
chaotic.
Okay.
Ironically, you guys are talking over each other.
Commissioner Andretti.
I just wanted to say that I'm pretty unimpressed with our current trash service company. Yeah, it's, I've also seen other information from people discussing their discontent. I think we've made at least 4 phone calls or 4 attempts, and we've been told every time that we will receive our can that we're missing on that Friday, and it doesn't come. So then we call again. Oh yeah, it's gonna come this Friday. And then we call again. Oh, it's gonna come this Friday. So finally I just called, and she says, yeah, we're gonna escalate it. I'll be shocked if it shows up this Friday, to be honest with you. I don't know that it will. I also had voiced a complaint to them that one of their trucks decided to blow a hydraulic line on our brand-new paved street that looked so beautiful for like 3 weeks. Until they did that, they went ahead and threw whatever chemical powder to soak up. In fact, auto shops use kitty litter, but I don't think that's what it was. But they threw something on it right away to try and clean it up. But then they just left it kind of like that. So the street sweeper came by a few times over a few weeks. I'm not saying he came to specifically clean it up. He didn't. But that I had called and said, hey, you guys got to get somebody out here and like really get this cleaned up because it looked terrible. Oh yeah, well, I'll get that information over to our supervisor, and of course, nobody went. It looks the same. It looks terrible. So I just wanted to put that out there. I know we did it to save some money, and that's all great and good, but it hasn't been a great experience for me. So hopefully I get my can on Friday. We'll see.
I will actually second something. I requested a special pickup, and they said, okay, put all your stuff out. So I put everything outside. Didn't come. Called again. They said, oh, we'll make an exception. We'll come back the next day. Didn't come. It was actually out on my curb for a week and a half before they actually came and picked it up.
Surprised code
So-
enforcement didn't come out to your house.
Did you also notice that the cans are like way thinner in material?
I've broken 3 of them already.
Yeah, they're not like the other.
Well,
the other
not me,
cans were.
but-
Yeah, well,
They
yeah,
broke.
their
3 of
systems.
them broke.
Yeah, their system's a little bit different on how they actually, the one had an arm, this one has a channel, a channel that comes up, but it's pretty violent if you've ever watched the way that they handle the cans. And they just,
way louder.
they're louder and they slam down, and it's a thinner material, so they're just not holding up as well either. But anyway,
They
I
break.
just,
But I have to say, I've had really good luck with them. Like special pickups, any problem I've had, they've been really responsive.
yeah, I'm sure it's not, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
that I'm just putting it out there that I wish that they would maybe try a little bit harder for
Yeah.
most. But I'm sure most people have had either an okay experience or just a non-experience, which makes it an okay experience, right?
I'd like to just make a comment on that. I will certainly pass both concerns, but yours concern. On the customer service aspect, that's an easy fix. There should not be that impact. There's obviously other impacts logistically that can occur.
Right.
But responsiveness and just the customer service aspect, that was heavy on the conversations initially, and it's been heavy conversations since. I'm sure you've seen them at all the events. they take a lot of pride in the customer service aspect of the community.
Right.
So we want to make sure that.
Well, and that's kind of why I brought it up, because I just want to make sure that people are getting the experience they would expect, or the customer service that they would expect.
Commissioner reports?
Well, just a follow on. In the apartment area, one thing that we have with the waste hauler is that each individual apartment is treated like a single-family home. And they get 2 bulky item pickups annually, each apartment. So if you have a 10-unit building, that's 20 pickups annually, okay? And for no charge. And now I've had at least 4 of them, 4 or 5, and probably on 3 of them I was billed for it, but then I call and I remind them, look at their contract. It's, and they reverse it immediately. I think that that if you're talking to their people, make sure they, and maybe we're unique, maybe this is a unique feature that we, they don't have too many cities that have that in there, but that's what we have, okay? That's what we negotiated. And then also that be communicated to the owners of the property. We have, every rental owner has to get a business license. So you have that information. I mean, when you send out the notices for your business licenses, you could send out a blurb, just a reminder that, in an effort to keep the alleys clean and free of we all get dumping, okay? I mean, and it's not always the tenants that live in the building. There are people that drive, they're going to dump something and they stick it in the alley in front of somebody's building or in the back of somebody's building. And then we get the citation, or we get the notice, okay? And I call them up, tell them to go out and pick it up, and I give them an apartment. The owner has to call, the tenant can't call. So the owner calls, and you just keep track of your units, maybe the second unit or the third unit or whatever, and it gets taken care of for free. But they need to be aware not to bill, okay? I mean, that's...
Yeah, you better check your bill.
Yeah.
Almost like
Yeah, you gotta look at your bill. So anyway, but beyond that, I haven't had a problem with the service yet, but who's to say,
Noted. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, then we're adjourned.